I remember when I was going around the world, I met this French guy called Erwan. I was waiting to go up into Tibet, and we shared a hotel room for a couple of weeks, and we'd walk around, and he used to kind of spout French psychology and philosophy at me. And one day he said that life serves you lessons like dishes, and if you don't learn from the first dish, it gets served again but spicier. And if you don't learn from that one, it's served spicier and spicier and spicier again until it's so spicy that you have to learn the lesson.
Welcome to episode 73 of the Cycling Europe podcast. My name is Andrew Sykes, and you've just been hearing from Leigh Timmis. We're going to hear much more from him in a few moments. He's going to be talking about cycling around the world. It took him 7 years, and then when he returned to the UK, when he returned back to his home city of Derby, then he set about preparing to break not one, but 2 world records. More from him in a few moments. Apologies that this has been the first episode of the podcast for, I think, about 6 weeks now, but hopefully over the course of the summer, when I've got a bit more time and I'm on holiday from school, I'll be able to record and publish 2, 3, 4 podcasts over this summer, so watch out for those. On the subject of the podcast, if you'd like to get in contact, then you can do so by visiting cyclingeurope.org/contact. And if you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so by visiting cyclingeurope.org/support, either financially or with a rating or a review on the site where you're listening to this on. Back to Leigh Timmis. He has just published a book called The Race of Truth, and it's all about him preparing for and then breaking the world record for cycling across Europe, west to east. He did that after having cycled around the world for many, many years. And I began by asking Leigh to introduce himself.
I'm Leigh Timmis. I'm the world record holder for the fastest cycle across Europe and also for the greatest distance cycled in 7 days. And I've also cycled around the world.
Can you take us back to your formative years as a cyclist? When did you start cycling, or was it something that you took up when you were an adult?
No, I think the bike is something that has always been in my life. Like I can remember being a kid and learning to ride on a little, what would you call it? Like a balance bike sort of thing. And then getting a BMX. And I grew up on a bit of a building site. Dad was building a house for a couple of years. So I used to get breeze blocks and joists or like scaffold beams, I guess, and make little jumps out of it. But I think the time when I really got into bikes was around school, like secondary school, when me and a group of friends would all ride over to one of our houses and we'd sit and watch these mountain bike videos. There was one that I remember called Dirt, and it was kind of like, I don't know, it felt different to what mountain biking or cycling is now. It was all about just going out and having fun. It wasn't endorsing brands or winning competitions or any of that. Even though these guys were amazing, like the best in the UK, it was just a group of guys having fun. And that's, I think looking back, that's what I wanted to capture, me and my mates. And so we'd watch that and we'd be like, yeah, let's go out and do our own thing now. And we'd go up to the woods and we'd go and learn tricks in car parks and that. And it was just kind of escape and freedom. You know, growing up in quite an industrial city, Derby, I think getting that escape, even though if it was just out to the woods or out into, I don't know, just a little bit further out of town, maybe into the Peak District, it was a different world.
Are we talking, 1990s here?
Yeah, mid-90s, yeah. The golden years.
So you could have been the Danny McCaskill of Derbyshire.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that this is where all talents, if you could call it a talent, all talents are built from, isn't it? If you find something you're so passionate about and you just fill as much of that into your life as possible. I'm sure that Danny would have been the same. All people who come out great, they just had a love for something. They did it so much that they became incredibly good at it. So I guess that was an element that got me into cycling. But I think that kind of to bring it more up to date and to bring it to where I am now, I actually lost all of that. I kind of gave it up, I would say, for this pursuit of success. So I went to university, and for a couple of years, I was in the mountain bike club. We used to ride out to the woods. It was very similar, on the Wednesday afternoons and the weekends. We'd ride out to the woods and we'd do our tricks. And I ended up doing a bit of amateur cross country racing as well. But in the last year of university, I gave all of that up because of this idea that I had to pursue success. And success for me at that time was kind of like this. I think a lot of people would feel the same, kind of socially prescribed. Like you get a good qualification, a good job, earn good money, get the respect of people around you. And in my mind, I thought, well, how does this spending 10 to 15 hours of cycling a week, how does that fit into this model of success? And so I gave that up, and I kind of gave up a lot of the things that I was enjoying. And I got that first class degree, and then my friends moved away, and I started working harder and harder. And I had a life without the things that I loved in it, without cycling, without friends because they'd moved away, without family. Um, and really struggled with my mental health at that time, struggled with depression, anxiety. And it was just an opportunity to go. Actually, it was on a motorbike. I went to Iceland for a month with two of the guys that I worked with. And I was kind of that spark from my childhood that had been on push bikes. It was sparked again by motorbikes, being out in this incredible world of like Iceland is volcanoes and glaciers and deserts, and you're out in the thick of it, completely alone, wild camping, doing this crazy stuff. And I remembered what it was all about, and that inspired the cycling around the world. Yeah, putting together that love of travel, that love of the bicycle, and then it turned into something, like you said, epic.
But you were working in an industry, you were working in the film industry. And, from my perspective, I would have thought, yeah, in your 20s, recently graduated, film industry, making films, that's pretty exciting. That's a pretty cool thing to do. Did you not feel that sense of kind of, yeah, I've made it, I'm actually doing something meaningful in life?
I think that when I went into film, I was pursuing, I went, I remembered this recently. I went to university and I had this dream of being an outdoor pursuits like filmmaker. Like if somebody jumps out of a plane and they want somebody filming them as they're parachuting down to the earth, or they're doing a mountain bike video, or, being outdoors in those extreme environments. But the more that I went through university, the more academic everything became. And I realized I was actually really good at that. I excelled. Um, and I think that there was a part of my life, I think there always has been to an extent, where I've confused making other people happy with making myself happy. And I think I made the lecturers happy because I was getting these great grades, and I probably made my parents happy. And then I got jobs in the media production world as well, and made them happy. But actually, it was taking me further away from what I wanted to do. That idea of, I think maybe it seemed almost less credible. You've got this film industry where it's all very theoretical and it's driven by science and technology and these well constructed teams, and everything's so precise. And I just kind of wanted to be this guy who went and jumped out of planes with a camera. And I don't think that it almost wasn't a high enough achievement. And I think that is actually something we'll probably talk about quite a lot, constantly in this pursuit of more and more success. Um, and so I ended up in the filmmaking world, going down this avenue of becoming more of a lecturer. I was running workshops, helping other people to make their films. I worked a lot of time in dark editing studios. I specialized in animation in the end, which was the opposite end of the spectrum to being outside in the outdoors. You're kind of locked behind a desk for long hours, staring at a monitor. And I wouldn't say it was anybody's fault, but it was just the direction that I ended up following. And I don't think it was actually the calling that maybe I wanted to go for. Reflecting on it now, I feel like having a degree in film, having written a book, having gone through my own mental health struggles, be it having world records in cycling, I've almost got this package that, with this world of social media, I want to revisit that filmmaking world and do it in a different way. Maybe just do it the way that I'm supposed to do it. put all of those skills together. Yeah.
So what happened to actually lead you to making the decision to head off around the world? And when you did do that, was it initially, did you think, oh, I'm just going to kind of do this for 3 months or 6 months or even a year? Did you really expect to not come back for 7 years when you set off? But what happened? What gave you that idea of actually this is a thing I could do?
Yeah, it didn't happen. It wasn't like an overnight sort of a dream. Oh, this is what I'm going to do, and then you wake up and do it. It took a while. So the catalyst was certainly going to Iceland on the motorbikes, and actually within 6 weeks of finishing that trip, I came back to the UK, gave up the job, sold the car, sold the motorbike, left the house, and within 6 weeks, I lived in New Zealand. I decided that I was going to be a snowboarder, actually. I was going to travel around the world, chasing the snow seasons, partying hard, and like living this great life. So I went to New Zealand and learned how to snowboard just with some guys that I met. I picked up a secondhand board. And after a couple of months, I fell off, I broke my collarbone, and that was the end of that dream. But what I started to realize was I loved the places that I was visiting. I had a great time in New Zealand. I met really interesting people when I was traveling, saw some great places, started working in bars doing that as well. Went to live in Canada, kind of pursuing that same dream. Again, didn't end up snowboarding though, just traveling and working. And it was probably around that time, about 2009. I think Mark Beaumont was had he finished his first round the world record?
He probably had, because it was, I remember watching his films in 2009
Hmm.
before I did a long trip in 2010. So yeah, it must have been around 2007, 2008 when he'd done that.
Right. So that was on my radar, and so was, I don't know if you remember, Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman. They did that motorbike video. So all these things were in my mind, and I'd love travel. I loved going to Iceland, New Zealand, Canada, a few other countries, just traveling in between. And I knew that I loved cycling. I knew that I'd enjoyed that, and so I started putting these ideas together. And I thought, well, I could I could ride a bike around the world. Um, and so I came back and I saved some more money. And it was, I'd say there was probably just a few months of preparation. Most of it was saving money. Not that that was an awful lot either. But then there was a few months of putting a bike together, getting a bit of an idea of a route, and off I went, which was completely the opposite of um, the world records. And did I intend to do it for 7 years? No, not at all. I thought it was going to be 2 to 3 years. But and this is it's that joke that all of my friends seem to love. I just went out for a pint of milk and ended up getting lost, or my navigation's so bad that I was meant to take 2 years, but it ended up taking seven. Um, but it ended up just being a journey that I fell in love with it. Um, my intention was always to go to Australia. That was the first leg, the UK to Australia, because I knew if I ran out of money, that I would be able to get a job there, work for a few months, maximum a year, and carry on the trip. Um, and I think these punctuations through the journey were quite interesting as well. So I worked in Perth, Australia for 6 months, had a great lifestyle there, managed a bar, had a great circle of friends, lived in a nice place. Everything was really good. I would have loved to have settled down, but there was a map on the wall of the interior of the outback of Australia, and there was an adventure there. I still wanted to go back to that world, so I pursued it and I carried on. And I ran out of money again. I taught in Taiwan for a year, and again I still had that desire to keep going. And every time you stop, you get that chance to reflect on what you've done. And I think maybe this is something that we all need to do in life a little bit more. Actually, just take stock of where you're at, look back, and decide the direction that you want to take the rest of your life. Um, and so I did that a couple of times, and I always had that desire to keep going. I guess the third time when I was thinking of stopping was in South America. So it's kind of like 6.5 years in. And I didn't stop then because I started to realize that actually what I was looking for, I probably wasn't going to find on the bike. Like I'd had this amazing few years, but I was starting to look for community and relationships and to settle and to belong a little bit more. I remember around that time, some people were starting to recognize me. I think they, in this long distance cycling community, it's a small world. People get to know each other, they hear each other's stories, and people knew what I was doing. And we'd meet and we'd chat. And they'd be like, oh, if you go down to the bottom of Tierra del Fuego, the bottom of South America, and then across to Cape Town and go all the way up through Africa, then that could be the longest trip ever done. And it didn't strike me as being the thing that I wanted anymore. Like another 2 or 3 years on the road sounded like a long time, and there's more to life. Like I still love cycling. I think I'll have that for my whole life. But yeah, that's what kind of took that journey to an end.
Is it possible, and it might not be possible, is it possible just to describe the route that you did take over those 7 years in 30 seconds, 40 seconds?
Yeah. So it was 51 countries. I cycled took a ferry out of the UK into France and then just kept going east. So it went through Europe and then followed the Silk Road through Iran and the Stans up into Tibet, descended the other side of the Himalayas into Nepal and India, cycled kind of a back to front 9 through Southeast Asia and then went across to Perth, cycled through the outback of Australia to Uluru and then down to Melbourne, cycled through New Zealand, sailed through the South Pacific up to Fiji, New Caledonia, and then ended up going to Taiwan. From there, cycled through China for 3 months and then across to Alaska and all the way down the west coast of the States till I got to Peru in South America and then headed east, obviously, keep going east across to Rio. Flew from Rio to Morocco and back through Spain and France and back to good old Derby in the UK.
Just out of interest, how did you? I'm looking at a map here. That's why I'm staring over there rather than at your screen. How did you get from China to Alaska?
I took a flight. Yeah, this is one of the things. Yeah, I had a dream of going around the world flightless. I think maybe it was a dream of a lot of people around that time. But actually, it was almost a blessing not to be able to do it. It was a strange one. So I took the ferry across from Dover to Calais, got into France, and then all the way from France, from Calais to Calcutta. I've never said it like that, and it's quite nice. Yeah, from Calais to Calcutta was all on the bike. And I remember there was a real moment of kind of elation when I descended the other side of the Himalayas and realized that this amazing world that I'd cycled into, which was like temples and prayer flags and monkeys and incense and kids riding past on scooters and colorful buses and hot water coming out of the ground, this jungle, this tropical world that I'd cycled into, I'd cycled there all the way from sort of an industrial city in England. And that made me feel amazing. There was something incredible. And I wanted to continue all the way around the world without taking a flight. I got to Calcutta and I couldn't go through Myanmar because their political leader was under house arrest at that time. It's under military rule. They would potentially let you through a border, but you might be obliged to leave your passport with them, so you exited from the same port of entry. So that wasn't very useful for circumnavigation. So I didn't do that. And I was looking for container ships. I'd read these kind of romantic stories from decades before of just being able to jump on a cargo ship, do a bit of work in a kitchen or sweep the deck, and then you get off the other end and it's no problem. But I took a long time trying to find people, had a lot of conversations, and since the terrorist attacks of 9/11, you can't do that. It's just impossible. There's a lot of red tape for obvious reasons. So I kind of hit a dead end, and you can't stay in one place forever trying to pursue something that could never happen. So I was sort of forced to take a flight from Calcutta across to Bangkok. And when I did it, it sort of just released this imaginary restriction that I'd put on myself. There was no need to have that restriction. And actually, I realized that I can't control global politics and economy, and that's not something I can control. You can just control the things that you do have power over. So from that point, I took a few flights wherever I could. I tried to sail. but there's a few. I did look at trying to sail from China to Alaska. There's is it the Aleutian Islands that you can sort of. There are some real hardcore sailors that take that passage, um, but it took me quite a long time to find a crew that would let me sail with them from New Zealand to Fiji. And there's multiple. There's so many. There's dozens of people leaving New Zealand to go to Fiji every day in that season. But you might get a dozen people, if that, in the whole season, not just per day, but in the whole season to go from China to Alaska. It's just not, you've got to have the right boat, the right equipment. It's extreme sailing. And that, yeah, that was never going to be on the cards. So sometimes you just got to pick your battles with that one.
I'm reminded of watching Around the World in 80 Days with Michael Palin, because he uses container ships quite a bit when he goes around. But, that is back in the 1980s. And I remember a few years ago looking into, I think it might have been actually when I went, was it when I went to Nordkap? And I was trying to work out ways of getting back. But I did look into the container ship thing. And I think you're right about the 9/11. That really has changed it. But I think also you can still do it, but it's just phenomenally expensive. I think it's now seen as a luxury thing. And clearly, when I'm sure if you pay $10,000, $20,000 to have a berth on a container ship, they'll treat you like a king. But if you're just wanting a cheap passage from China to San Francisco, then it's just probably not going to happen nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, if rich people are looking to pay a lot of money to slum it, I can show them an amazing view from the seat of a bike. Like we can go and slum it, camping on top of rubbish heaps, and it'll only cost a few thousand a day. It'll be amazing.
Was it the same bike all the way, all across those 7 years?
Yeah, it was. I think this is something that really surprises people. That bike never got stolen, never broke. I think the worst thing that ever happened to it was it was a steel frame and had an aluminium seat post in it. And this is something that anybody who cycled in the 90s will probably understand, that those two metals just corrode themselves together. And it had been on a boat for a long time and there's salt water in it and stuff. So when it came to leaving Taiwan, I couldn't get this seat post out. And I just took it. This is a story. It's a theme of my time in Taiwan, actually. I took it to like this back street kind of workshop, and he just took it in and he was like, yeah, no problem. And I didn't speak very good Chinese, and I was just explaining it, and he was like, yeah, I've got this sorted for you, no problem. And he got this blowtorch out, and I thought it was just going to heat up the seat post, and it would just pop out. And it wasn't that. He like took it to the frame, and suddenly like everything was starting to get warmer and more. You could see the metal starting to heat, and then suddenly the paintwork just like sparked into fire, and my beautiful bike that I've ridden halfway around the world is on fire in this guy's workshop. And I'm like, no, what are you doing? No. And then he kind of like put the blowtorch down the seat post, and there's this molten aluminium like bubbling out everywhere. I was like, oh no, what is this guy doing? Like, I've tried to save myself a few pounds. I've absolutely ruined this bike. But he got it out, and we put another seat post in, and I ended up painting that bit of the seat post with a graffiti artist friend of mine, and it's still on it now. It always reminds me of that. But yeah, I thought maybe it's a bit of a theme, trying to save money. I actually had my wisdom teeth taken out in Taiwan as well, and it was the bargain of the century, £3.50. But they ended up they just couldn't get it out. So he called his assistant over. I couldn't speak Chinese. And I'm glad, because he must have said, can you just come over here with that chisel? And he had my mouth open. She's got this chisel in my mouth trying to get these teeth out. But yeah, so yeah, I guess they are the more routine adventures of an around the world cyclist.
You said that you stayed in South Korea and you stayed in Perth and you spent a period working. Was that common, or was quite a lot of it day to day where you would just travel, sleep somewhere, travel, sleep somewhere? And what kind of accommodation were you using? Were you in a tent? Were you hosteling?
Yeah, it was real grassroots. It was all tent. I mean, I think this is one of the things that surprises people. It certainly surprised me. I thought that I would go around the world and it would be kind of this one man, one bike, one world, like man against the world. You'd never see anyone. You'd be so high up in the mountains and the jungles, you wouldn't meet people. But this was the beautiful thing about the bike. It's just that vulnerability when you're cycling from the horizon, and somebody working in their garden or working in a cotton field in the middle of a country that you don't understand at all, they've seen you come all the way from the horizon, and it doesn't matter what the conditions are. You're so vulnerable. So if it's raining, you're soaking wet, or if it's sunny, you're getting burnt, or if you're going through a busy area, you could be attacked. You never know. And so um, I think that vulnerability just invited me into people's homes, and they just shout to me from the street. You wouldn't. I didn't understand languages from most of the world, most of the countries that I went through. Um, but people would shout you over, and they'd start to wonder where you're from, and you just get this map out and show them the world and where you've been, and it would suddenly spark these amazing opportunities. You'd end up staying at somebody's house, you'd go to work with somebody, you'd end up at a wedding, or those amazing opportunities. So I was so surprised that I don't think there was a single country that I went through where I didn't spend a night in a stranger's house, which was incredible. But a lot of the time it was wild camping. So I went around the world on about £10,000. It wasn't much at all. Well, I left with £10,000. I think I worked out it was about £5 a day. That would have included what I earned when I was out there as well. And that's very little. It cost less to go around the world like that than it would have done to do the world records, which were such short ones. And I really loved the wild camping. It was a beautiful thing. I write a little bit about it in the book, reflecting on waking up with the sunrise and going to sleep with the sunset, and finding a space where you can maybe put up the tent next to a river in the evening and have a wash and be able to filter some water to cook with, and get up the next day and the sunrise hits the tent and it dries it all out for you, and you start the day with a coffee next to the. It's just it was quite beautiful, and that way of living also made me simplify everything so much as well. So you're carrying your whole life with you in order to travel like that. The bike weighed about the same amount as I did quite often, carrying days worth of water or Arctic gear if you're going somewhere cold. But it made you really pare everything down to just the essentials on every mountain that you come to, every hill that you go up. You're like, oh, do I really need to take that many pairs of socks? Do I really want to carry that extra book? Do I need this translation stuff? Or you strip it right back to make your life as streamlined as possible. So that connection to nature was a really beautiful thing.
Bearing in mind that you had a background in filmmaking, did you film? Could you film at the time? Well, it's not that long ago. We're talking, you set off in
2010.
2010. So did you film it? Did you ever have aspirations of making a film about your journey around the world?
I started filming it. So I think this is one of the interesting things about that trip. It was right on that turning point of kind of where life turned digital in the Western world, or maybe globally. When I left, the iPhone 3, that first iPhone, had only been out a few months. And so I had like a flip phone. I think I ended up not even taking that for most of it because, you're not going to need a phone. You can't afford to get a SIM card. You can't afford to pay for that sort of stuff when you're out in the sticks. So the technology that I took was I had a Sony camcorder sort of thing. It recorded onto an SD, like a memory card, but it was a big camera. It wasn't like a phone where you can just pull it out and like start shooting. You had to boot it up, and like if you were filming something, you were filming it. You weren't there to do anything else. So I took that, and I did have a laptop with me as well for editing, and I had these amazing ideas of what I could do with it. But one of the things that I really struggled with was when you're out there, if you put a camera in front of somebody, it completely changes the relationship that you've got with them. And I'm sure it would do if I did it between you and me. If we went out for a coffee and I just got the camera out, I was like, oh, so Andrew, just tell me a little bit about blah, blah, blah. You don't speak naturally. It's you kind of put up this barrier between you, and so it was quite rare that I filmed anything. And I realized that I didn't have access to electricity. One of the there was a lot of things that I learnt, growing up in the UK, where you've got electricity on tap, you've got hot and cold water, you've got everything that you want. I thought the rest of the world must be similar to that. I think, is it 5% of the world live like this? Like, you can't just plug in and charge your stuff. You can't just get hot water. It's not like that. Um, so I think there were kind of logistical barriers like that. There were those social barriers where I actually wanted to enjoy the world, and not just film it. Um, but what I did do was, if I got to know people, I would take a still. I took a digital SLR as well. Sorry, no, it was a DSLR. Um, so I got some quite nice photos, and I wrote a diary every day of going around the world as well. So and I sent them home every 3 or 4 months. I sent a bunch of diaries and anything that I collected home to mum. Um, so I hoped that she would read it and sort of see my version of the world, but she said she found it really difficult to read. I think she was so worried that she didn't like to see what I was up to out there. But they're all here at home now, just waiting to have a book written from those amazing experiences.
Yeah, you were saying earlier that, the book that you have written, The Race of Truth, is more about the world record attempt, but you do mention from time to time the round the world journey. I'm just going to read you a quote here, and I think you're talking about the transition between returning back to the UK and then finding other things to do. But you've written, this is when you were travelling, nothing else mattered when the wheels were spinning. Cycling around the world, I never had to deal with problems for long. Experiencing a bad day, disagreement or misunderstanding, I would cycle on knowing that tomorrow would bring a new place or new people. The bike constantly avoided obstacles, my roadblocks. Apparently, I was the only person who didn't see that whenever I had the opportunity to settle, I made another rash decision to leave. Travel was my great escape. Bearing that in mind, it must have been a bit of a wrench to actually take that final decision and think, right, okay, that's it. I'm going to go back to Britain and I'm going to build a new life.
Mm. Yeah. For me, a lot of that is that psychological side, which is, I think, it's the strong thread through the book. I think it's a line in the book, that I kind of always had these strong legs that helped me to avoid a troubled mind. And that's, a lot of people would have asked me when I was going around the world, what was I escaping from? And I would always escape that question. I'd be like, no, I'm not escaping. I get a better exchange rate for my hours on the bike for the experience that it buys me, rather than the hours behind a desk for the money that I would earn. Um, but I would say that I was definitely escaping. It's interesting, when I came back from going around the world, those struggles that I'd had before I left, when confronted with responsibilities and finances and relationships and all those pressures that we all have every day, um, I still dealt with them in the same way. And this was the strange thing for me. I thought that I would go around the world. If you imagine, or this was certainly my experience of it, imagining those heroes, I don't know, like Ellen MacArthur, a lady from Derby had sailed around the world. Surely she'd come back and she'd have no problems, like, I don't know, public speaking, or having securing finance for another project or whatever. Or Mark Beaumont, cycle around the world, or I don't know, those who climb Everest. These people who achieve incredible things. Surely normal life wouldn't be daunting to them anymore. But I came back and realized that I'd experienced this world that was external to me, but I actually hadn't changed. I was still the same person. And I think that it's been a big lesson through everything that I've done, that it is you that does it. You take yourself everywhere that you go, everything that you do. Um, and so going around the world, it was wonderful. It was very freeing. It was adventure every day. And I don't regret a single day of it. But I think maybe I had to learn that I hadn't gone on a journey that I thought I had. I'd seen this external world to me, but I hadn't dived very deep within. Um, and that is what the world record becomes. It's looking at the road ahead of you. On a world record, it's very different to going around the world, where you go around the world, you come across a challenge, a problem, and you figure it out along the way. and then you carry on. Whereas for a world record, you're trying to achieve the best. You've got to analyze what's going to come up ahead of you on the road, be ready for it with the interventions that are going to get you through that as quickly as possible, and then push on without that stopping you at all. And in order to do that, you have to look deep inside and look at those dark areas of yourself and admit that. I think this is the most difficult thing in change, admitting that there's areas of you that you don't like and that you are willing to change them and delve into those a little bit deeper and start to kind of become the person that you want to be, not that you are at the time.
So when did you get back to Britain?
Got back in 2017.
2017, and the world record was in September 2018. So we're talking about a period of about a year. Is it more than a year? A year, 18 months?
It was 18 months, yeah. April 2017 until September 2018, yeah.
So when you arrived back in Derby, and in the book you talk about arriving back and there being TV cameras, family, quite rightly, a bit of a celebration. This is somebody who's been around the world for 7 years on a bike, back in Derby, back in the country for the first time, and you were presumably a local hero. Did you have any inclination as to what you then wanted to do over the course of the next few months and years?
No, I didn't. It was a very strange time. It's hard to describe actually, unless you've been in it, because my world had existed in a tent. Like I'd lived in a tent for 7 years. Really, I'd cycled every day, and then you come back, and suddenly everybody wants to know about it, but you haven't known that everybody. You've just known this very humble little life. And so, yeah, I got these great opportunities to go and speak at a TED Talk, a National Geographic event. You get to go on TV news and magazine articles and all of these amazing things that hadn't really been on my radar at all. So unpacking that was quite difficult. And I also didn't really know how to tell my story either because it had just been my life. Like, I don't know. At the time I was definitely there kind of comparing it to if I'd been an engineer for 7 years and then suddenly everybody wanted to know what it was like to be an engineer. I was like, well, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, I've just been doing this every day. So that was really odd. And then, yeah, the question that always comes around, so what's next? What do you do when you've cycled around the world? And it was a tricky one. I didn't really have much of a plan around it.
Could you have gone back into filmmaking?
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I just wouldn't have wanted to. It had too many difficult memories attached to it. I hadn't changed. I think I needed. I didn't realize that I needed to change, but the record taught me that. So, I mean, how did I get to the record? I think that's the interesting part as well. I started looking. So we just discussed then about having this troubled mind, always using my strong legs to escape it. And I think that's what I was subconsciously doing again, looking for another escape, looking for another challenge. The first thing that came to mind was what's better than cycling around the world? Well, it's a world record. This kind of idea. I came back from around the world, and I struggled to talk about it. People wanted to know how much I would earn for cycling around the world, or what kind of a certificate or an achievement you get, and there's nothing. It's just for you. I came back with a maxed out credit card. I had nothing to show for it, and I was given these speaking events, and I felt like a fraud. I didn't feel like I could tell people to just give up that job that you don't enjoy and go off and do something that you love. Like, go off and ride a bike around the world. I felt like I was being paid by these organizations to go in. I should be saying, this is how you achieve your best self. These are some of the tools that I use. And riding around the world wasn't a kind of comparative. You can't say, well, your around the world journey was better than this other one, because it's not. Like, they're just unique. They're these beautiful journeys. And so I was looking for something in a way that had that competitive edge where I would feel like within my rights to talk to organizations. And I think this is something interesting we can pick up later. Like, what is the greatest meaning? Is it getting a certificate for a world record? Is it cycling around the world? And I think that individualistic, like just pursuit of happiness, it's huge. But actually, I get much more recognition for the world records. So yeah, I did look for something with a bit more prestige, and I saw that world record, and I was like, I could get that. But I think this was the interesting part of my approach to the record. Like, it had been traditionally done in this adventure way, where you you sacrifice a bit of sleep, you ride a couple of hours longer every day, and then eventually you get to the finish line a few hours before the previous record. Um, I met somebody who kind of mentored me through the early part, well, through that whole year actually, but on the business side. And we were looking through the Guinness regulations, and it said there's no difference between a supported attempt and an unsupported. And I was like, yeah, but I don't need a team because I can go and do it now. And he was like, yeah, but which way will you get a better result? And I was like, yeah, I could do it better with a team, but I can do it now. I don't need that. And he's like, well, which way will you mitigate the risks? Well, yeah, with the team, we'll mitigate them, but I don't need that. And he was like, if that's the best way and the safest way, then that's the way you'll do it. And it turned from it turned from being something that I could do to something that I wanted to do. Like, I was not capable of putting together a team of scientists, of committing myself to a training program, of raising £50,000 sponsorship, of fulfilling all of those obligations. And I had to learn it. And I think this is what forced that transformation, committing to something that I wasn't capable of doing, but I set my sights on it and I made myself kind of accountable. And then that forced me to change a hell of a lot.
The chap who you mentioned, the guy who mentored you, he had a connection in the bike trade, I think. Is that correct?
Almost. He owns a mobile technology company, but he was the organizer. So on the last day, and this is kind of that serendipitous way that the world works, the people that you meet influence and change the course of your life. So riding back in from around the world, I'd raised £12,000 for a local children's charity. And that charity wanted to organise something special for me coming back. So they got in contact with a local bike club and said, Leigh's going to be riding back in. Do you mind riding for the last 15 or 20 miles with him and join him in the city centre? So Steve, the guy who I mentioned, he's the organizer of the bike club, and he got a bunch of people together. There was probably about 30 of us. And we rode into town. It was very overwhelming after riding for 7 years alone. And suddenly you've got this peloton around you. And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is insane. And at the end, we said a few words and the champagne popped. And afterwards, he just came over and said, look, when the dust settles, why don't you come over and we can have a chat? I'd really like to know a bit more about your journey. And so it was a couple of weeks later when I'd had all these offers and the opportunities that I was talking about earlier. And I went round to him. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. And he started to help me unpack all of that. And that's how that relationship started. And it was really nice. We always joke that his family kind of adopted me that year. And I spent more and more time there. He helped me to realize how what I'd done was applicable to so many people's lives. Like, just because what I've done is on a bike doesn't mean that those lessons and those experiences don't help other people. And we started to realize the similarities, which was really, really lovely. And I spent more and more time with his family. I'd end up staying there, and I got into road cycling because of him. Previously I'd only done mountain biking, and then I did touring on the touring bike. And then I was welcomed back by this road cycling club, and he was like, why don't you join the bike club? And I was like, there's no way I can ride with a cycling club. You guys are all dressed in lycra, zooming around at 20 miles an hour. That's like, I've been riding around on this bike that I carry in my tent and my water, and there's cakes in this bag, so I can just stop wherever I want. I had no idea that I'd be capable of doing that. So that was another massive change, like the opportunity to ride with a bike club. And then I realized that, oh, actually, those 7 years of cycle touring have given me this quite a good foundation of fitness. Maybe I can do something with it. And Steve realized that in me, and where I thought that cycling around the world could be the end of my cycling, that might be the biggest thing that I do. He saw it as the beginning and helped to nurture the next phase of it. So it's always amazing. The people that you meet, you never know what to expect, what's around the corner.
So you're back from your round the world trip. You've met Steve, and he's mentoring you, helping you with speaking and what you're going to do in the future. And you finally come up with the idea of breaking this world record, which takes you from the western point of Europe in Portugal into Russia to the official eastern point of Europe, and you decide to try and attempt to break that world record. You said initially you wanted to perhaps do it unsupported, and then he talked you around and encouraged you to think, well, actually, if you're going to do this, you might as well do it really well and break it properly almost. And you started working with the University of Derby, and your transformation from round the world cyclist to lean, mean cycling machine kind of starts. And that sounds quite an arduous process.
Yeah, it is. It's something that I never expected. I think that I had these glamorous ideas of what it was going to be like. Again, watching your heroes on TV, and they're in those testing labs, and they're wearing that breath by breath analysis to measure the gases going in and out of your lungs, and taking blood lactate samples from their finger, and having the power monitored through their legs. All of these things that just a couple of months before, they'd just been sensations. Riding a bike up a hill, that's got tough. I'm sweating a bit, was like my best scientific acknowledgement of the effort that I'm putting in. And then suddenly everything's quantified in wattages, or blood lactate levels, or VO2 levels. And yeah, everything that previously was just a sensory kind of feeling becomes data. So we did a lot of testing. Everything was very scientific, and actually, the training was so different to what I expected. Primarily, the fact that it was mostly psychological was massive. I never expected that. But just to briefly go into the physical side of it, I was looking at ultra endurance athletes on social media who were putting in 12, 15, 20, 30 hours a week on the bike, thinking that's what I'm going to need to do. I'll be out on the road all the time. Rain, snow, shine, whatever, I'll be out on the bike. But actually, it was the total opposite. Being based on science and mitigating risks, we started in January 2018, started the training. And the first session, I remember it was something like 58 minutes, something like that. An interval training session on a static bike it's called the Human Performance Unit at the University of Derby. And I thought that was going to be a breeze, like an hour on the bike. That's amazing. I've just spent 7 years, like every day riding however long. So an hour on the bike, that's great. In fact, you know what? I'll go into the cafe afterwards, grab a coffee and a cake. It'll be simple, straight away done. But I went in for this interval training session, and it was 6 repetitions at a high intensity, like tougher effort than I'd ever done before. And in the first interval, I was like, this is unreal. Like pushing this kind of power, that's impossible. I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I got through that interval, and then it went into a break. And then you go into the second one, and it felt longer than the first one even, and that stinging in your legs and the sweat and the blood pumping through your whole body. You can hear it in your ears. It's intense. But I got through it. And then by the third one, I was really struggling to hit the target. By the fourth interval, there was no way I was going to hit it. By the fifth one, I was getting furious. And by the sixth interval, I was just like, I can't believe that these guys have made such a mistake. There's no way that I can do this. Right. You know what? I'll just get to the end of this session, and then I'm going to take this data back to them. I'll show them what a mistake they made. And I did exactly that. I had a shower, I got the data, and I went back to the physiologist, and I put the data down his desk. Like, look, Mark, you've made some big mistakes here. There's no way that I can do that. So why don't you go away, do your maths again, figure out what I can really do, and I'll smash this train out of the park, no problem. And he turned around to me and he said, everything that I've set you, you're capable of achieving. I can prove it from the data that we took from that test. And what you've hit is a psychological obstacle. That's a mental obstacle that you've got to overcome yourself. And at that point, I started to realize the benefits of psychology, and actually that it was my mind holding me back. So physical training continued all the way through. Every week I was in the lab 3 times a week and then out on the road once at the weekend. It was all very short. The whole idea was you increase the capacity of your body. So your body is like this engine. If you can increase its capacity, then you've got a wider range of physical gears that you can use. Um, but it was the psychology that was fascinating. Finding out my motivations behind it, diving back into some of those troubled times, understanding the decisions that I made that defined me, and then putting interventions in place so that when I did struggle on the road, I had a way through it. And there was a test that they did for that as well to see how I'd react. But we can go into that in a bit if you like.
I'm working out that you must have set off on the 10th of September 2018.
Yeah, 10th.
What was the thing that you were aiming at? Was it your level of fitness, or was it the time? Was that dictating when you were going to set off? Obviously, the 10th of September. At some point, you must have decided that was when it was going to happen. But ultimately, it wouldn't have been worth setting off if your fitness wasn't at a particular level. So were you working towards that 10th of September deadline for a long time, or was it relatively late that you decided, right, okay, I'm now at the level of fitness that I require, let's do it next month?
No, it's a fine balancing act of a lot of different ingredients to get everything right. I originally intended to do the record on, I think the original date was the 16th of June. There's two weather windows. You've got before summer, before the heat of summer, and then after. And before was better for me. I think the days were slightly longer. The timing was right to have the team come out and join me on the road. So the physiologist and the psychologist, we take a nutritionist and a physiotherapist as well. It all seemed to point towards that. With that window of opportunity, it gave me from January until June. I think it was 20 weeks training, 21 weeks training, something like that. It was perfect. So we could fit everything in. And in that time, I had to organize all the business side of it as well. So you've got the logistics, the route planning. You got to build the right logistical package around it. How you're going to get the motorhome out there? How you're going to transport the team across? What you're going to do for food, for charging, the media program, everything that goes around it. Getting the sponsors on board as well, so you can afford to do it all. It's a hell of a package. It's massive. And long story short, we did it in September because I think that my expectations were unrealistic looking back on it. I was still 30% short of funding about 3 or 4 weeks before we were supposed to set off to do that June attempt. Which is quite mad, isn't it? That I'd got myself into this physical condition where I was ready to do it in June. The team were there and ready. The route was ready. But actually, it didn't happen because of the financial pressure on it. And so the whole project is built around this ethos of no compromise. And at that time, when I didn't have enough to take everybody out and do the full attempt, I had options, and I talked through it with Steve and with the team, and we came up with some different scenarios. I could go out and do it unsupported. We could train me for the last month. We could change the training program a bit so I'd be in a better condition to do it unsupported. I could take one person out who would have a vehicle who could meet me once or twice through the day, or we could put off the timing and do it later in the year. And so with this ethos of no compromise, that's what we did. And so training went off the boil for about 6 weeks, I think. And I focused a lot of time and effort on the business side of it, got the money up to the level that we needed. And then that threw up new problems. The team that I originally was going to take out couldn't make it. So I had to rebuild a team. But that had its benefits as well. And I think that what I've realized is that all of these challenges that come along, they're all lessons. Looking back on it, I was gutted. I was so hurt by these moments that were so difficult to overcome, but actually they taught me the biggest lessons. Like building that team from scratch again, I learned what was important in the team, and I really pared back the ingredients, and I made some really good decisions. There were some great team members, and realized a lot of the business side is actually some of the most important stuff up from these records as well.
You touched upon the fact that going in June obviously means you've got really long days, and I would have thought for something like this, that is really important. Were you not tempted to delay it for a full year until the June of 2019 and try them? Because it must make a big, big difference if you're, even by September, the end of September, the length of the day is significantly shorter than it is in the middle of June.
Yeah. No, it didn't cross my mind to put it out that far at all. I think it would have compromised a lot of commitment from the sponsors who were already on board. I would have had to put everything off. I don't know what I would have done with my year. I would probably have had to go kind of into the world of work again. So one of the things that I don't know, I think that it's quite glamorous from the outside, people attempting these records, but the levels of sacrifice that go into it. So I'd come back from cycling around the world. I was living at my mum's house. I was in my mid-30s. And this world record, in some ways, I kind of saw it as like a way to launch myself, maybe. Um, so if I'd have put off the record by another year, I would either have had to stay living with mum and commit the time to breaking the record, or go into the world of work, go and get a house. And with that commitment, you've lost your 9 to 5. You've got to be working every day to pay the bills, and then how do you build a world record on top of that? Which I have done for the second record, but they were probably some of the considerations that were in my mind when I thought September. Also, the daylight hours weren't such a big consideration, because one of the big differences with our record attempt was the primary importance, which was to maintain sleep. So we put together a strategy that you could basically have repeated almost eternally. Throughout the record, I definitely degraded in how alert I was, how happy I was. I think there's an element of not being. This was the first time I'd done it, and I think that with experience, I would have done things slightly differently. I would have had more awareness of what was going on. But the sleep would still stand. So we were factoring in 7 hours a day sleep, which is unusual for ultra endurance. Most go for minimal sleep, maximum cycling time, but you end up getting so fatigued, so tired, your performance goes down to you see it quite a lot with ultra endurance cyclists kind of trundle along at 15 miles an hour, and it's basically all that you can push, all that you've just got one gear, whereas our average was 19 miles an hour, and it's because you factor in that sleep. It was a very holistic program. It was it was like wraparound care, really. So you're looking after your sleep, you're looking after your nutrition, you're looking after your physiotherapy, your bike efficiency, everything to try and make the whole package work. And for me, that's the metaphor, that's the theme of the book, and it's really a story about the whole of life. Like, in order to get the best achievement in life, or to be the happiest or the most fulfilled, it's a holistic approach. You can't focus on one thing. I'm going to be the best cyclist and then expect to be happy in everything, because it doesn't work like that. You've got to look at every different aspect of what makes you a human being, be good at all of that, and then you get to another level. And that was the same in a lot of the preparation as well. You know, a lot of the work that I did with the psychologist was what we called being the best at the things that require no talent. So getting your sleep under control, being in the right place at the right time, being organized, really simple stuff that I'd neglected for my whole life. And we brought it together. And then you create this foundation where you can use your talent. And it was the same out on the record as well.
Talking of the record is the fastest person to cycle across Europe. But how do you define Europe? You can, at the western extremity, no problem, kind of the western bit of Portugal. Do they have a definition as to where Europe stops and Asia starts?
Yeah, it's my geography isn't amazing, so I'll probably mix up all the terminologies, and you'll have people writing in going, "Lee doesn't know what he's talking about." But I guess it's geographical. extents. So is it the tectonic plate? You've got the Ural Mountains, which is the European Eurasian plate. Yeah, I was going to dig myself into a hole here. You've got you got the Ural Mountains, and that is what they call the geographical border of Europe and Asia. So Ufa, which is the last city that you cycle to on this world record, it's about 1,000 miles into Russia, um, and it sits just before the Ural Mountains. So that's what they call the extremes. You're going from Cabo de Roca, which is the lighthouse on the coast, the most western point of Portugal. Beyond that, you've just got the ocean and then the United States. Um, and then going east, yeah, you go across 10 countries with the route that I took, and you've got to finish at the train station in Ufa. So they are the only guidelines that they give. Actually, it's an A to B. You start in A, you get to B. You can take any route that you like. You have to ride the bicycle every mile, every pedal stroke. You can't take a ferry. You can't get in a car, whatever. And then there's some other more technical details around the GPS and drafting and stuff like that. But it's a really basic A to B record.
Is there a defined route that people recommend, or did you kind of have a blank canvas when it comes to making up your own route?
Totally blank canvas. Some of the guys that had done it before me had sort of copied each other's routes. There seemed to be a way of doing this record where you would look at the previous guy, know where he'd slept every night, and if you went a few miles further every day, then you would end up breaking the record by a few hours. Going with the whole no compromise approach, that didn't seem like the best way of doing things to me. Like, let's find the best way of doing it that's possible. So I did look at the other routes. The most direct one went through Belarus, and this is just more of that background work that you end up doing, and it takes a long time, and nobody ever sees it. Realizing that only people from Belarus or from Russia could cross over the border between those two countries. That limited the shortest way distance-wise. But then, due to the curvature of the Earth, I started looking at other routes and realized that there wasn't a great deal of difference between either going north or going south. If you take a more northern route on a map, it looks a hell of a lot further than taking a southern route, but it's actually really similar. The further south you go in Europe, the more mountains you've got to take on the Alps and the foothills around there. So I looked at that northern route, and it was really it had a lot of benefits. It was a very similar distance. It was much flatter, and then the southern route as well. One of the other logistical things about doing this supported is considering the vehicles that you're going to have for the sport team. I needed a motorhome, so I took a motorhome across mainland Europe. If I was going to go through Ukraine, which was possible back then, this was before the war, I would have needed a different motorhome to go through Ukraine and then a different one to go into Russia. So taking 2 points to change motorhome, you're multiplying up the chances of there being a problem. I don't know, maybe you can't get the motorhome at the right time. Maybe the rental place is closed. Simply swapping things over might not work. So the more northern route only had one change. We could go all the way to the border with Russia. I can't remember, is it Latvia, Lithuania, around there. We could make one motorhome change and then go into Russia on Russian plates, which made it the most sensible option.
And did you know exactly where you were going to be stopping each night, or was there a certain amount of flexibility in your plan?
Total flexibility. The beauty of having the motorhome is you could pretty much park anywhere. We found a lot of laybys, but this really comes down to having a team who was just incredible. The road operations manager, a guy called Jem, he was amazing. So every day was planned out in 4-hour blocks. So 4 hours on, half an hour off, repeat that 3 times, then 2 hours at the end. So you got 14 hours on the bike. We had ideas of the kind of distances I might cover in those blocks, in those days. And certainly from a lab-based perspective, where I'd done so much work with the scientists, we knew the power output that I would be able to give on any given day, the kind of calories that I'd be using, the hydration, all of these sorts of things. But actually, when it came to that real-world execution of the project, the road operations manager he was so experienced, he had so much knowledge of it. He realized that traffic lights, traffic jams, roundabouts, junctions, cities, traffic, all of this stuff, it's going to slow down that average speed. And he was just amazing at finding the right place. So it was almost as though 14 hours is up, that's the end of the day. And there he was, like absolutely on the second. I would get there, and the motorhome was there at the side of the road, ready to go. The nutritionist was in there cooking, and we'd all be ready to settle down for the night. So we didn't know where that would be. Ended up being quite a few laybys. Sometimes they would find a campsite that was just in the right kind of area, and we'd have a bit more of a, I wouldn't call it a luxury night. Like, it's the Tour de France at the moment. You're watching guys who have their own mattresses delivered to their hotels. They've got like, yeah, it was nothing like that. It was quite grassroots for such a complex project. So sometimes we got a camping site where we could charge everything and having a hot shower and all that. But yeah, the flexibility. I guess even with such a scientifically run project, you have to have an element of flexibility to maximize what you can do out there.
When you were cycling, what were you thinking about? Were you listening to things? Were you thinking back to that trip around the world, all those 7 years? Were you thinking, God, what am I doing? I could have been just kind of sauntering down the other side of a mountain very slowly and getting off every now and again to have a chat with the locals.
Yeah,
What was it like? What was going through your head?
all of the above. You go through. It's a very strange thing. So on the build up to getting to the start line, between me and the scientists and everyone that I'd worked with, the sponsors, the aerodynamicists, the bike builders, everybody, we'd created this product that at the start line, you're the best version of yourself that you've ever been. It was amazing psychologically, physically, with all the equipment, with the team. And then from day 1 to day 16, you become this gradually unraveling human being. It's so strange to just see the layers of motivation, the layers of your identity slowly getting stripped away through every element of adversity. You go through those moments of joy. The first day where I loved it, like starting off from this place where I'd visualized so many times, this lighthouse, and I knew that the sea would be lapping at the cliffs just to the side of me, and that we'd be standing there, and I knew what I had to do, and the team were there around me, and then we set off, and the sun comes up, and I remember the sunrise on the first day just being spectacular. By that point, I'd already cycled up into the hills, and you'll either have seen for yourself or you'll have seen photos of those moments when the clouds are stuck in the valleys and there's just the hilltops that you can see on the top, and they all had windmills on there, and the sun caught the clouds and they became this kind of pink, like candy floss sort of color. And I was just in this moment of knowing that I was on the second, like on the path to the second achievement in my life. I'd already cycled around the world, and now I was doing a world record, and I was on the bike, and it was everything that I loved about the bike, from those memories of being a child, that feeling of freedom, from those memories of going around the world, of seeing those different things, that total sensory, God, what's the word? When you dive into something. Immersion, total sensory immersion. That's what I was going for. It was like the sights, the smells, the tastes, it's all there, and I loved it. And then the more days that go, the more frustrations you get, the more you dig into the reasons why you're doing it, and then you fall off, and you have to find the reason to get back on again. And towards the end, it became really difficult. In my own mind, I'd had expectations again that actually I was going to even surprise the team. I was going to show them that I was even better than they originally thought. And then there comes a day when I realize I'm not going to achieve that. I mean, we did actually achieve the best target that we'd put together as a team, looking at all the variables and what could happen. But in my mind, I'd set a target that was unachievable. And when I didn't hit that, that was a real low point for me. And you go through a lot of questioning of who you are and who you want to be. And I think, thinking of the things that go through your mind, to spend so long on a bike alone, you you really dig through some dark times. And that moment when I realized I wasn't going to achieve what I expected, what I ended up saying to the team was, that I'm never going to be out here again. And actually, what's really important to me now is I wanted to just stop being this robotic athlete. I wanted to stop being analyzed, and I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to enjoy that moment because I wasn't going to be there again. And I think that it was the first time in my life when I'd actually realized that, like, I don't have to be aiming for that finish line. This lesson came round to me again a few years later when I was out on a date, and I was having this chat with a girl, and she asked me why I went to university, and I said, "Oh, to get a good degree so I could get a good job." I was like, "Why would you go to university?" And she said, "For the experience." And it hit me. I was like, "Oh God, did I waste those 3 years at uni?" Like, if we're constantly pursuing that finish line, you'll never enjoy that moment. And I think that um, I really found that it was a really poignant moment, and I reflect on that kind of when I came back from the record and looking back on what was important. I remember when I was going around the world, I met this French guy called Erwan. We stayed on the edge of Tibet. I was waiting to go up into Tibet, and we shared a hotel room for a couple of weeks, and we'd walk around, and he used to kind of spout French psychology and philosophy at me. And one day he said that life serves you lessons like dishes. And if you don't learn from the first dish, it gets served again, but spicier. And if you don't learn from that one, it's served spicier and spicier and spicier again until it's so spicy that you have to learn the lesson. And I think that it was that moment on the record when I was forced to eat the spiciest dish. And I started to realize that actually, it's just the moments of life. It's just the experiences, the places that you go to, being able to share it with these incredible people. That's actually life. It's not about the finish line. Um, there's a beautiful bit of psychology that I actually think the whole book is about. It's kind of what I wrote it about, but it's open to interpretation. And that is to one of the psychological interventions on the record was that at the finish line, the only person that I had to justify the finishing time to was myself. No one else actually knows what those times mean, but you have to be able to look back and say that you gave it everything, that you can look back with no regrets. And so me, the psychologist, took that future version of me and put him up on this metaphoric balcony and said, if there's any difficult times out on the record, you can just look up to yourself on that balcony and ask for advice. And I remember him saying in that moment, like, if you were looking down yourself now and it's cold and it's wet and it's dark and you're tired and you want to give up, what would you shout to yourself? And I was like, well, just keep going. Don't stop. Just keep pushing those pedals. All you got to do is keep going. Because when you get to the finish, it's all of that fatigue and that tiredness and the rain, all those negative things have gone and you're just left with those actions. That's all that really exists anymore. Um, and and for me, that's the metaphor of life. I think for a long time I've been constantly searching for that finish line, get to that achievement. But actually now it's about getting to the finish line, looking back and knowing that you gave it everything. I think living a life with no regrets, that's something really special.
What was the previous record? What were you aiming to do?
Before I did it, it was around 25 days.
So basically, you smashed it. You smashed it by 8, 9 days.
Yeah.
Was that a help or a hindrance? Did you think, oh God, this is almost too easy? Would it have been psychologically better for you if you were aiming at, say, 17, 18, 19 days rather than 20, 25, 26?
We tried to take this out of the equation all the way through psychology, actually. I could kind of reverse it and say, if I wasn't, because this was a question that I asked the psychologist, I was like, if we get to a certain day and it's clearly obvious that I'm not going to break the record, at what point do we give up? And he turned around to me and he said, what are you talking about? What do you mean give up? And I was like, well, if we're not going to break the record, there's no point carrying on, is there? And he said, you're not going out. Look, you're not going out there to break a record. You're going out there to see how fast can Leigh Timmis ride across the continent. If that happens to break a record in the process, then that's great. But that's not what you're going out there for. You're going out to find something about yourself. You're going out to learn about what you're capable of. And if you don't break the record, you come back and you've got all of those lessons and those experiences to learn from. You didn't break it, but what did happen on day 20, 25, 30, whatever happens? And I think that it took a lot for me to understand that. And I would say that actually going out and doing the record at that time, I still didn't understand it. But having gone through it, I think there's something really important in that. I was asked while I was out there, why would you keep pursuing something that you've so clearly broken now? And it's the same answer again, because I was trying to find out what I could achieve. It's not about breaking the record. And it's a weird one as well, because, after the record, looking back on it now, I know that there's time that I could take out of that now. But what you do in the moment, you do with the best intentions, and you do with all the knowledge and the experience that you've got in that moment. And looking back, hindsight's beautiful, isn't it? And I'm a different person now. We always say that that attempt will always be the worst one that I'll ever do. And that one, I'd never done it before. But if I went out and did it again, it would be the worst attempt that Leigh version 2.0 could possibly do. And if I went out and did it a third time, it would be the worst attempt that Leigh version 3.0 could do. Because you learn something every time.
Now, while you were talking, I Googled an image of the Cabo de Roca, and it's a beautiful coastline. You've got the lighthouse on the cliff there, amazing views over the Atlantic Ocean. And I'm a real fan of starting and ending my trips at iconic places. And I've finished at a few lighthouses. I started at the Temple of Poseidon in Greece. I've finished at Nordkap. They're really iconic, amazing places. And that looks like a bloody good place to start. I also Googled...
Oh, no, I know what you're going to say.
Ufa train station. And one of the pictures I found has been annotated, and I'll read out what it says. It says, Ufa is the most dismal city of Russia. So what was it like finishing your world record, your epic world record, in Russia's most dismal city?
If I was going to change anything about that record attempt, I'd change the direction that I did it in. It was awful. Yeah, there's only one thing that can make Ufa worse, and that's if you arrive there after 16 days of cycling through storms. You're covered in tar and dirt, and you're exhausted. I know that I would certainly. This is something we talked about afterwards. I would certainly have enjoyed arriving in Cabo de Roca a lot more. Imagine cycling out of industrial city in the middle of nowhere and heading towards that beautiful Portuguese coastline. You could have your friends and family waiting for you there. There's a lot of incentives to get there. The incentives to get to Ufa were never about the location. It was always about finishing. And I got there, just to make it even worse, I got there in the night. I got there and it was cold and it was raining and it was dark. And maybe in some ways, actually, it's a better metaphor for life. That, you get to the end and it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. When I got there, there's a photo. I don't know if you can Google that one. There's a photo of me at the finish line, and there's some old ladies getting their suitcases out of a taxi behind me. They've got no idea what's going on. They don't know that a record's just been broken there. They're getting their suitcases to get on a train and go and, I don't know, visit Barbara in another industrial city in Russia or something. But life does just go on. And at that point, I got bundled into the motorhome. We had to get to a hotel and we had to get a flight in a few hours. We had to get a bike packed into a bike box, and life did just go on. Maybe there's an element of the difference between adventure and world record pursuits, I think, in that. But maybe you can combine the two. It would certainly have helped me in the last few days, knowing that I was heading towards a beautiful place where there was friends and family and there was a bit of a break waiting for me. Yeah, that would have helped.
Presumably the reason why you did do it from west to east was the weather and the winds, no?
Yeah, 100% prevailing wind. That's the way it goes around the world. Um, so, I mean, yeah, it did. It helped towards the end, actually. The first few days, I had a bit of a headwind, but then you do turn slightly and start going pretty much due east. And I did pick up a bit of a tailwind at that point, which is quite useful. But that's the main reason. Yeah, I don't think you'd see. It's the same reason that Land's End John O'Groats goes that way. It's you picking up those winds.
Right, so since you finished that, obviously that was back in 2018. You've now written the book, The Race of Truth, which is going to be published on we're talking on the 10th, and it's going to be published on the 13th. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, Thursday the 13th.
So by the time people listen to this, people will be able to buy the book wherever they buy their books. But you've also, since completing that world record, you've got another world record. Can you briefly just explain what that is?
Yeah, that's the greatest distance cycled in 7 days, which is another crazy one. That record, it's got its highs and its lows. So I guess the high is the fact that broke the record, 2,230 miles in 7 days. It's quite intense. It's I can't remember how it breaks down. It's around 315 to 320 miles a day, I think. The adversity that I fought in that one was, I'm not sure if you'll remember. I'm sure it would have been on the news, quite a prolific news story at the end of last year. So this record was broken in November 2022, and in the week that I attempted it, Hurricane Nicole hit Florida. So every moment of day 3, 4, and 5 were impacted by this hurricane. That was never supposed to really get there. I did quite a bit of research around where you'd find the best road for this kind of a record. So I was looking for something straight but long enough that I wouldn't get bored. Out and back, it's 50 miles out, and then you come back, so you're doing 100 miles on each lap, so to speak. There's no junctions, so nothing to stop me, no elevation gain. Good climate in Florida in November. It should have been perfect. And since records began in 1850, only 2 hurricanes had ever made landfall in Florida in November, so no chance of that happening. Day 2 of the world record, the team take me to one side. Lee, there's some bad news, got to tell you. I was like, yeah, it can't be that bad. What? We've prepared everything. Everything's set to be perfect. Yeah, there's a hurricane coming. Absolute nightmare. We went out there with the intention of adding 200 miles to this record. We ended up adding 19, but I think the lessons that I learned about a team who dig through incredible depths was amazing. I didn't have enough money on that budget again to pay people to go out there, so they weren't getting paid. They wouldn't get their name on the certificate. But when they turned around and said there's a hurricane coming, I would expect people to go, so we're going to have to jack it in, actually. That's kind of the end of the opportunity. But they turned around and said, oh, we think that we can break the 7-day record in 6 days. And I was like, oh, no way, that's insane. And it was another lesson in motivations as well, and in making amazing teams. What makes people dig to those depths? I think that's all really fascinating. And I think that the more I learn about myself, the more I kind of see the changes that I've made in my life. I kind of like that as the next step. I feel like going around the world was about seeing this external world to me, and then coming back and doing the 2018 record and writing the book, The Race of Truth. I think that was all about looking inside me and my own motivations. But moving forward, I feel like there's a combination of the two, and I really do realize that everything that we do impacts other people around us. And I think that's something really important to factor in for whatever I do next, whether it's fun, whether it's record breaking, whether it combines the two, if that's possible. I like the idea of being able to impact the lives of others, motivate others. And I think that I could tie more into the impact of others on me as well. I don't know how it works yet, but I love the idea of doing something with a group or with a pair or having a lot of people around to do an event with me somehow.
So you haven't got any plans as to what you're going to do in the course of the next year, 18 months, 7 years?
My plans for this year are much more relaxed. So I've had my foot on the gas since the beginning of 2022. It was all training for that record. And then straight off the back of the 7-day record, I went into editing the book, and that's taken me up to this point. And I think that, like we'd spoken about, going around the world, having those moments of punctuation to look back at what I've done and to really digest it and look at where I want to go. I think it's really important. And I think I'm coming to one of those points again now. In some ways, you can keep on doing more and more and more records, but um, what does it mean unless you're sharing it in a way? The book is really important for me, um, in that I hope that the things that I've gone through help somebody else to be able to achieve stuff as well, to be able to, maybe if somebody reads my own mental health journey through the book and they go, actually, I can relate to that and I want to talk about mine, that's a win. The book's done its job. That's amazing. If somebody reads it and goes, actually, those tools that Leigh's used through that to achieve his best, I could do that to be a great engineer or a great dancer or a great artist, whatever it is, it's done its job. If somebody just reads it and has a great journey across a continent and sees me going through all of these depths and coming out the other side, that's great too. So I want to push that out. I want to take the time for the rest of this year to go back to those roots. So we talked about when I got into bikes and going over to my mate's house after school and just learning tricks and playing in the woods. I'm building a mountain bike so I can revisit that. I think you see it in a lot of athletes who spend their sports time always training. So on the bike, you're training at a certain power for a certain duration. You want your cadence to be here. You want this kind of elevation. And sometimes you just want to go out for a ride just because it's a ride. You want to hang out with your mates. And that's definitely where I want to be this year. I think that time, just taken 6 months to sit back and have that breathing space, might give me the time to go, yeah, I see what's brought me to this point, and now this is the next step. That's where I need to go. So there will be more things. I can guarantee that. It's the way that my mind works. There'll always be something on the radar. But I'm interested in taking the time to find that out myself.
Is this now your full-time job, or do you have another job?
No, it's not my full-time job. I work in mental health at the moment. I work on an incredible project which combines the NHS community mental health team with the voluntary sector and local authority social care, into a project called Living Well. So the idea is that it stops people falling through the nets, falling through the gaps, in the provision of mental health care. We've got massive waiting lists across the UK, and there's a lot of work to be done in preventative care. So working with the communities, working with grassroots organisations that are already embedded into communities, and giving the mental health support to people before it becomes a severe mental illness, before it becomes a crisis moment. So it's a huge project. It's really fascinating. It's exactly what the world needs, and I love it. I think it ties into everything that we've spoken about helping others as well. It does take a lot of time and energy too, so it's another good reason to take a bit of a break. And of course, I would love to go back to making this a full-time living. There's a lot of avenues that I'd like to explore with that. The filmmaking, the media side, I think there's an avenue there. Some other adventures, more books, speaking events. I feel we spoke earlier about when I came back from around the world, feeling like I didn't have something to talk about. Even though I'd cycle around the world, I didn't feel comfortable telling people to give up their jobs and go and do it. I do feel comfortable in the lessons that I've learned now. I really feel like I've got something to tell everybody. I'm really proud of what I've achieved. And I really feel like there's something in this. I don't expect everyone to go out there and become record-breaking cyclists, but if they can just find something little that makes the best of their life that it can be, then that's the lesson that needs to go out there. So yeah, that's another aspiration there as well.
Okay, well, I think that's a really nice place to bring it to a close. It's a fascinating story, and it's a really well-written book. You've told the story in a really quite an academic way sometimes, but thoroughly interesting. It's a a fascinating story, especially the transition between you as a cyclotourist, albeit an epic cyclotourist, to being the other end of the cycling spectrum, really, a hyper fit ultra athlete. So it's a really interesting read.
Oh, thanks very much. That means a lot coming from you. Your books are incredible as well. So thank you very much. That's really kind.
If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, just visit the website. It's leightimmis.com, or it's the same on social media as well. It's Leigh Timmis, LEIGHTIMMIS, across all social media, except maybe Facebook. It might be Leigh Timmis official for that one.
Okay, well, good luck with the book when it comes out, and I'm sure it will fly off the shelves. But thank you for talking. Whatever the next adventure is, whatever the next world record is, then good luck in the future.
Thanks very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Right, okay. It's now at this point where people say really interesting stuff.
Oh no!
Not that everything wasn't interesting. It was fascinating, but I finish recording, and then the chat continues, and I think, God, why did I finish recording? But I've got to do it at some point. But that was really interesting.
I think we nailed it. Yeah,
that was a lot longer than I normally do, but well, not a lot longer, a bit longer. But I don't think I'll edit that down at all. Anyway, so I'm gonna. I can't find the button to stop it. Where's the stop button? There we go.